Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to Wicked Warriors. Of course, everybody knows me, Tiffany Wise, and today we have Jess on, and she's going to share her story. So keep your comments where I can read them because I have a hard time reading sitting this far away. And I'm going to go on mute, Jess, and it's all you, honey.
Okay, where to start? I currently have an open CPS case, getting to the point where they are attempting to terminate my rights as a parent. There has been a significant amount of dishonesty, lack of integrity, and law breaking on behalf of law enforcement, the agencies, and inability to gain access to records, lack of due process, and essentially I'm just trying to tell my story and get the awareness out there that this happens to people across the country, across the nation, and mine is one of a million stories. I have 3 children who are currently in the system. One is involved in an interstate child compact, the ICPC, and is currently residing in another state, and 2 of which are currently still in foster care. The entire time, the goal had been return to parent up until my abuser was put in jail. And at this point, we understand that even though the trial hasn't commenced yet, that the term that he is supposed to be facing is life. I don't really know where to start with my story.
You can start anywhere you feel comfortable.
Okay, so in 2021, it was mid-July, my abuser had attempted to kill me. This resulted in police coming to my residence, and I was escorted to the police department where I was supposed to be sitting there for my own safety. At first, it was on the road, but then as they decided to bring in the SWAT team, machine guns, bullhorn, the whole 9 yards, they said, for your safety, we need to bring you down to the police department. They had gone back and forth a couple of times, one time of which a police officer said in front of my kids, well, oftentimes when we do this sort of thing, the perpetrator does not make it out alive. Does he have any weapons in the house? And this scared my kids pretty bad. I sat there for a majority of the night until about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And then I was allowed to go to a local hospital to be evaluated for my injuries. At that point, when I was medically cleared, the sun was coming up, and I decided to leave state at that point in order to flee the abuse. During that time, even though I was already gone from the state, it had been reported to the local CPS agency that all these things were going on because the police are mandated reporters. Excuse my cat. And I'm just going to remove him. And essentially what happened is it turns out that the worker had perjured my address on the petition, saying that I was within state, and I do have evidence to show the conversations between us, that she knew in fact that I was out of state. I provided her with a receipt of a store I had visited that was, I believe it was New York at the time, where I had stopped at. And 169C is a law that they have to see the children in order to kind of like make a finding or close the case, so on and so forth. They were demanding that I produce my children in person. I obviously was not going to turn around and go back to the area where I didn't feel safe. And so I started asking for help using legalese, and I ended up remembering a lawyer that I had talked to once because of an incident previous, and she advised me to not tell anybody where I was going, not even my own family, so that I didn't put myself or children at risk of being found. She essentially was conversing back and forth with the caseworker to let her know that because she perjured the petition with the address, that she didn't have any further authority to act because it created an overt act by the judge. At that point, they attempted an Amber Alert, for which we did not qualify because there was no law that I was breaking and fleeing with my children. And then they decided to do a warrantless, non-court ordered ping on the perpetrator's phone, which, unbeknownst to me at the time, was in the vehicle. From that, they fabricated a story that the perpetrator was with me. The problem is it's not unheard of in domestic violence relationships for somebody to try and track you, to keep your location at all times because you're their source of, their dysfunction and narcissism. And it started a new case in a new state. And down here, they went to my children's school without my knowledge or permission.
Wait a minute. Hold on. I got a question.
Sure.
So when New Hampshire, you said New Hampshire, right?
Yes.
Okay. So after your friend, who's the attorney, told them that they no longer had authority, did they call to the other state? Is that how they got involved?
I don't have 100% certainty on that, and it's because I was trying to find anywhere that I could go. I was bouncing state to state, just trying to find anywhere that I could set up and give my kids a sense of normalcy before school started. And my understanding is that with this ping that they had, that they should have, in theory, at least tried to protect us. I never saw cop one, never had a welfare check, and I've come to find out that not only did they not issue the state mandated protective order that should have been in place, but they did not search for me. They did not try to apprehend my perpetrator. They did not try to do anything at all to protect us. And once I finally came to a stopping point when I ran out of money, that's when the other agency got involved. And I'm guessing it's a result of this ping, or because they could have found out that my kids were registered and the state of New Hampshire was trying to retrieve my children and bring them back up there to confer their jurisdiction or their place that they had been granted protective custody, but actual custody does not change until the dispositional hearing. Because they perjured the address, that court order was void, and they knew that. And it really pissed off that worker. She was mad. She had a vendetta. And when they tried to pursue the Amber Alert and it didn't work, that's when, I believe, to my knowledge anyway, that she had gotten whatever other agency involved and said, here's the information from 5 years ago in this other case, and they are currently recycling the material.
Yeah, they do that. They have a tendency to do that.
That's essentially what it is, but that case was closed with prejudice, which means it should not be able to be retried at this point.
Exactly.
And they're also claiming that other incidents of the SA that happened to one of my children occurred in the state that I'm currently in, and there's no physical proof of that. There's no medical evidence, and I'm not saying that there's no validity to her story. There obviously is. However, I feel like I would have known about that to some degree, but the school had never said anything, and you would think that if these things occurred like they say that they did, especially during the time frame that he would have been around, which I will have to fill in how that happened. But during the time that he would have been around, that she would have been able to tell the school, or been walking funny, or been able to tell a counselor, anybody, myself included, especially where she had access to be able to speak to me. Now, when I got down to this place, I'm in Kentucky now. This is where the guy found me at. And his threats to me were that because Kentucky has a 50-50 custody law and it's assumed both parents have equal custody, that if I didn't comply with allowing him to be in, especially his son's life, that he was going to start problems with CPS. I had already been beaten up. I had already made attempts to contact the local cabinet, the CPS people to get help, which they told me to call my old state because they couldn't do anything. I had attempted to call police, which one of our other advocates was on the phone when this happened and actually spoke to them. And at that time, they said it was not an extraditable offense, despite that he tried to kill me and all of the accusations that were flying around, and that there was nothing that they could or would do. And told, I had talked to a local lawyer. He told me that until I was in this place for 180 days that I couldn't go for custody. There was nothing that I could really do legally to keep this man away from my kids. I had run out of money. I did not have help, and unfortunately that was part of the abuse cycle that I was in, and I did make a stupid choice. I did allow this person to be around them, to put them on the bus, because it was the only help that I had. Otherwise, we would have been homeless. I did not have access to shelter. I did not have access to any help. So I own that mistake. That was my fault. Fast forward a little bit, they removed my kids. Now this man, he was not living with me. He was literally just manipulating access to me and to his child. He was homeless, staying somewhere in town. I believe it to be probably with his uncle, and just needed to be there to put the kids on the bus so I could work. And that didn't last very long. It had to have been maybe a week or two before CPS got involved anyway. And the way that the law is written down here, and based on the exacerbated detail, they say that if they find that there's any risk at all for imminent danger, and not necessarily any imminent danger, even if there's no evidence of abuse or neglect, they remove your children. The caseworker that came out told me that because obviously they didn't find the perpetrator there, and he didn't see anything wrong with my home, that he wanted to close the case in about 30 days. The county pushed it otherwise based on the 5-year-old police reports, despite this worker saying that in his 25 years they're not allowed to use anything from anywhere else in order to remove your children, especially where the case had been closed. I have all of that recorded, up to and including, police coming into my home. Let's see. I'm losing my train of thought here.
You're okay. I just want to point out to everybody that you were the victim, you and your kids.
Yeah.
He was the perpetrator. This man has more rights as a criminal than you and your kids do as victims.
That's exactly how it feels, yeah. And essentially, the difference between criminal and civil court, absolutely. And that's been a problem.
Yes.
Because subsequent to the kids being taken, he had broken into my residence again, because I wasn't able to go anywhere. I didn't have any more money. He had beat me up. I was purple head to toe, got some medical care because of that. And it was actually his aunt that had stopped him from killing me, because she was at the residence one of the times that he had done it. Another time he had done it and was trying to commit suicide in my living room, which I also have a recording of that. And calling police down here, still because my EPO did not say 500 feet, they would not remove him. They would not do anything about it. And the only reason why they did pick him up initially back at the beginning of that is because of a child support warrant. Nothing to do with any protection of me and my kids. Nothing to do with any of the things that he had done to me. None of it. And it's just been adding insult to injury the entire time. And
EPOs. Now
Yeah.
you live in a Commonwealth state, and so do I. Okay,
Yeah.
Virginia too is a Commonwealth state. What gets me about EPOs is, well, I'll say this: in Virginia, if there is an EPO issued, whoever the EPO is on, they are removed out of the house for 5 days. Okay, I don't know how long your EPO was, but the first one here in Virginia is 5 days. The second one is 10 days. And then you go back, and it ranges from 1 year, 2 years, or indefinite here in Virginia. Even if there wasn't a 500 yard or however they put it feet, they still should have removed him from the home.
Well, and that was kind of the process of thinking. And so when the other advocate that was on the phone helped me report everything to the old state in New Hampshire, and they said it wasn't an extraditable offense, I felt powerless at that point, like I had no protection at all. Even after my kids had been taken, like it still perpetuated to be a continuous issue up until they arrested him later and took him to jail for violation of the EPO. It turns out that he was working at somewhere and trying to sell drugs out of the place, had a gun that he wasn't supposed to have because of the order. And then obviously after he was in jail, then he started getting the violations for violation of the EPO because of phone calls he had placed to me. And I had different people reaching out to me saying, hey, there's a motorcycle out here. You need to go pick it up. Yeah, da, 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 da. So in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, well, I've got this case going on. I have no money. I need to have a lawyer. I could sell this MFer because we were married at the time to get the money to pay for a lawyer. So I entertained the phone calls from dude coming from the jail saying whatever I need to say to him that aren't always, the best in nature. But when you have somebody who's been abusing you for so long, you know what they want to hear to get the information. I end up getting given the key fob, different cords, different things like that, and the ability to file taxes and to get this vehicle towed. So I get the vehicle towed, I put it into a storage shed. Later on, CPS uses said phone calls against me in court saying that she's still got feelings for her abusers, this and that, taking all of the conversations completely out of context rather than seeing what I told them and saying, no, I was trying to get a motorcycle. But they very often twist everything that you say to fit their narrative.
No, they do twist everything you say. It doesn't matter what it is. You could say the sky is blue, and they'll tell you that you said the sky was green.
Right.
So once he went to jail, actually in Virginia, had you answered those phone calls in Virginia, you would have went to jail too, because you both violated the EPO. That's in Virginia.
Yeah. That's not how it works here, per my understanding. But it was also coming from, this was during, I guess, the intake process, which those were ones they didn't record conveniently enough, where I was jumping his shit about saying I wasn't impressed because part of the other thing I had to do is I was told where he lived at the time, because he had acquired like some sort of rooming house type of thing. I had to go pick up anything that I could find that I thought would be relevant to helping me. I go into that particular unit and find a lot of paraphernalia, drug paraphernalia, guns, bullets, you name it. So I discard this stuff because I wasn't trying to get caught with that in the Commonwealth. Hell no. And I explained this to the investigator when I had been detained unlawfully and put into this interrogation room. And they just kind of left it at that, understanding that I don't have a background. I've never been in trouble. just wanted to try and make sure that I had all my ducks in a row and see if there was anything in there that would help me with my case.
Why were you in the interrogation room?
All right. So when they decided to stop visits is because New Hampshire decided they were going to, this worker that was disgruntled decided she was going to send down whatever her narrative was, the fabrication of her story, because she was pissed off, partially because she was told off by my mother when she had come to her residence saying, you got to know where your daughter is, blah, blah, blah. You're hindering an investigation. You need to tell us, so on and so forth. And my daughter had disclosed that she had been molested in foster care. And my mother brought this concern to the CPS people. That worker then decided to tell her, oh, well, it's your daughter's fault that the kids were in care and the child's lying. Blah, 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 blah. So my mother told her where to go, how to get there, and pointed her away from the property. She was ticked off because they need to fulfill that clause in the 169C to produce the children to have a finding, anything like that, and couldn't do it. And then was told about what laws she was breaking. And so she decided she was going to play this glorified child saver and forgot the victims in the process. She decided to reach across 6 state lines and attempt that Amber Alert, the ping on the phone, the whole 9 yards. And so at this point, they're sharing all of this information, and CPS down here was pissed off I was recording them, and I kept saying this, and I had a court-appointed attorney at the time. Hi.
He's like, Mom, it's okay.
Oh, I think they can feel that this is triggering for me to tell the story, so he's probably just being a cat and doing his job.
He's fine.
And so they decided at that point to suspend the visitation between my children and I, despite we had 2 days a week. One day that was at their facility, supervised with a camera in the room and everything. And then I had unsupervised time at my residence that I had acquired when I finally got help from a local domestic violence program. And everything had been fine. Once a mysterious report had come in, which was a result of an incident in 2018, and it had been tried and closed with prejudice, as I told you, they decided, okay, we're going to take a break. We're going to investigate this. And so this cop, an investigator down here, calls me up 20, 30 times, follows me up the street outside the courthouse saying I needed to come into the police station. So essentially I'm ending up going over there. He brings me into the police station upstairs. First thing he says to me is, I hear you like to record things. Now, it didn't make sense to me at the time that it was probably a setup, but it was. And brings me into this interrogation room. They take my phone without a warrant, claiming that they're going to get one later, saying that they needed to do that for me to prove that I wasn't lying about the things that I told them. Because my position there was trying to back up my child and whatever she was saying that had happened to her, and to attempt to tell my story. They focused only on whatever was going on with the kids, and unbeknownst to me, there was a CPS worker behind the other side of the camera where they were manufacturing their second petition against me, utilizing whatever I said and twisting it to fit their narrative. And so that resulted in not only me losing my visits for 2 months, but during those 2 months before we had went to court, nobody would tell me what was going on. I had no idea why. So let me give you some context. In 2018, my child had told me that she thought that there were some inappropriate things going on. I flipped out and I confronted the abuser about it. I brought it immediately to the police, trying to get help. They get the CPS people involved up there. And we're getting ready to go into a CAC interview, and then suddenly they surround us with guns. They take my kids, and I thought we were just trying to sort everything out so my daughter could tell her story, whatever had happened to her. I just took her at her word, went to the cops, and it didn't work out that way. They took my kids away, and so essentially they made it to where they just weren't supporting me. I had court-ordered things where people were supposed to help me, agencies supposed to help me. It didn't work out that way. And essentially what happened eventually is they did a professional CAC interview for my oldest daughter. She denied all of the things that were going on. I don't know whether or not they did any medical testing, but to my knowledge, they never did a rape kit, none of that stuff. And she denied everything that had happened to her. And eventually the case came to a close because I had done everything I was supposed to do. I had gotten away from the guy, so on and so forth. The problem is that I had gone over to Vermont because there was no help in the state of New Hampshire at the time. And this was through a recommendation at work. Essentially, I went into something called a pilot program. We had all these rules, so on and so forth. When that program was running out, I was started to be offered housing by a lady named Mary from HUD over in Vermont. So I had to report to my manager back in New Hampshire, hey, I need you to take me off the lease, so I can get this housing. He never did that. So this lady thought that I was getting dual housing in 2 states and said it's a violation of HUD rules. I have to report you. I have to report your landlord. So I was denied that housing. The pilot program ran out. I was forced to go back to New Hampshire to the residence where I was. So I had them change the locks. We put a security strip on, the whole 9 yards. The perpetrator ends up getting released from some sort of psychiatric health facility because I'm guessing that was the route that he took for everything that he was doing. He gets assigned or court-ordered to come back to the residence, and so I complained to the landlord at the time and trying to enact the VAWA, which is supposed to be the protections afforded to us as victims. And he said because there was no active situation going on at the time and no police report that I could produce, and the other stuff was in the past, the only other way to get him away from the home was that he would have to sign himself out, like sign off the lease. He didn't do that. I had no money and I didn't have anywhere to go. So it perpetuated abuse even further for a longer period of time. Anytime that things would get too bad, I would call police. It was a quick catch and release due to new bail reform up there. $40, you're out on personal recognizance, and you're back to doing the same BS you had done before. During that whole time, he had abused a cat of mine, and they never ended up charging him for that. There was a lot of confusion as to who did what and when, so I'd have to explain, but we only have an hour. But because of the fact that the police would come out, they kept releasing him. They wouldn't help. I didn't have any recourse. I didn't have anywhere to go and bring my kids. I did have some friends that said, hey, if you could find a way out, we'll be here for you. Depending on when you leave and the availability of said friends, that story can change pretty quickly as to if you got somewhere to go or not. So I ended up creating myself a business, which I retain to this day, but I used part of that grant money to get away. But I had also created a foundation called Change from the Heart, so it would support domestic violence victims, and a portion of all the proceeds would go into that foundation. So if somebody ran into a situation like myself, they would be afforded the opportunity to get away somewhere safe until they could find somewhere to secure to be.
Yeah, a long time ago, there used to be programs, sort of like the Underground Railroad
Yeah.
for abused women. I don't know if they're still if they're still going on. I haven't heard about them for a really long time.
Are you
But
talking
what
about, sorry, are you
No,
talking about kind of like that Children of the Underground thing, or are you talking about strictly for abused women?
strictly for abused women, but their kids were with them, where they would actually get them out, move them around. I mean, like how the Underground Railroad was, right? Somebody would get you to where, like the red house with the barn, that's where you need to go, and from there they'll take you here.
Right.
I really truly believe, because the United States does not give two shits about domestic violence, right? Or kids, that we need to bring that shit back.
I definitely agree with you, because if I had seen an officer and they had done a welfare check, being so concerned about the welfare of my kids, and the state was trying to essentially repossess my children, then why did they not, with this ping, arrest him? Why didn't they come and get us? Why didn't they get us anywhere safe? So I'm going state to state trying to figure out, where can I go? Where can I go?
Right.
I couldn't get anywhere. And the money I did have, well, it spends as quick as it comes.
That goes back to what I said. I have pollen in my throat. I have to apologize.
You don't have to apologize. Go ahead.
It just takes me back to what I said. A criminal has more rights than a victim, and it shouldn't be that way. The victims are supposed to have the rights. If you have an EPO, if the police know these people are violent, we should not be letting them out on bail if the people that he victimized are still there. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, they should have moved you. Like, here we have a domestic violence shelter.
Yeah.
That's where they should have put you. Instead of CPS getting involved, they should have put you and your children in a domestic violence shelter.
Let me explain something about that. They will claim that they attempted to do this, but like, for example, when this occurred back in 2018, and I had tried to get away from this guy the night I went to the police, they had told me that they were dropping him off at the homeless shelter. And I had tried to go to the shelter that was assigned, which was a town over. I come to find out that the homeless shelter that they said that they dropped him off at was like 3 or 4 doors down from where the protective shelter was. I wasn't comfortable at all. I didn't feel safe. I know he could have seen me in town. Doesn't matter about the EPO. He could have done more bad things. So I drove around for 3 days with my kids and all of our stuff in the car, trying to find anywhere I could go. And in the state of New Hampshire, it is not something that is prevalent. Like, it's not a super rampant issue. So there isn't a lot of help, which is what brought me over to Vermont. And for a while, we were staying in a small hotel that the state had granted a voucher for like a week or two for before we got to the pilot program. But that was the problem. I had to utilize things through work and asking a ton of questions when I should have just had somewhere safe to go. And come to find out, they didn't even bring him to the shelter. They dropped him on the town line. So he could have been anywhere.
Why did they take him anywhere besides jail?
My understanding is it was because of new bail reform. And unless they catch you in the act or something like that, I don't know why the cops did or did not do what they were supposed to do. All I know is that they dropped him off on that town line, despite me being told he was dropped off at the shelter, and I freaked out. So I wanted to take off. And when I had decided finally, okay, I got to go home. I can't drive around. I can't find nowhere to be. It's a freaking holiday weekend. Nobody's helping me. I go home. CPS in New Hampshire tells me, oh, well, you failed to protect because we told you not to go home. You should have gone to this shelter, blah, 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 blah. And they don't know the kind of person I was dealing with. And for them to just drop him off any old place all willy-nilly, he's not in jail, and I know what he's done to me because I've been abused. I don't feel like I'm in the wrong for being freaked out.
Well, it's easy for somebody that's not in that situation to tell you what to do, right?
Yeah.
Because even if they know, they're ignorant because
They claim they know.
right. Because my whole thing is there should be a domestic violence shelter in every town, every city, every whatever, township, whatever people call it. Because just because people aren't reporting it doesn't mean that it's not happening.
But that's the problem. The biggest problem is that when you report it, unless they see something going on and then it's your word against the perpetrator, they're still given more rights than you.
Right.
And then you have to face whatever the ramifications are. And people also don't say anything and keep it to themselves and stay in situations longer because the first thing they do is take your kids rather than supporting you, the domestic violence victim, and your children, putting you in a safe environment and letting you sort it out and get the help that you need and taking care of that perpetrator and just saying, no, you're a POS. You're just as bad because you're allowing it to happen as if anybody asked to be abused.
Well, I am a domestic violence survivor. I got with my older children's father when I was 16. He was 23. Beat my ass while I was pregnant. When I wasn't pregnant, just had a baby, flipped me over a table. Literally, I had the baby at 12:50 a.m. and I was released at 10 a.m. that morning. Flipped me over a table that night. Cops would come. Nothing would happen. Like with your situation, they would take him to wherever, right? But he'd be right back the next day.
Yes,
I was
like a drunk
single
baby.
mom, right?
Yeah.
I'm a single mom. I'm not working because I'm pregnant again. Nobody's going to hire me. So let me tell you what happened. The straw that broke the camel's back. He broke my nose and then told me I was faking my own blood. I almost killed this man twice. I swear to God. I tried to suffocate him and he woke up. And then I was going to, you know how you get crushed ice out of the ice machine?
Yeah.
I was going to smash a glass up and put it in chocolate milk and make him drink it. Okay. So it's a good thing that I left. What did it for me after I had my son, he beat me up. He left. I packed all his shit up. I called his sister and said, if he steps foot back in this house again, I will permanently make sure he never puts his hands on anybody else again. And they took him away. Yeah.
I will say that I had made attempts at hurting the person who had hurt me. I believe the term they like to use is reactive abuse. Unfortunately, it just made my situation worse for me because I was not stronger than him. And I had a similar situation to you, like right after I had given birth to my youngest son. I'm at home and the baby was crying. He, I guess, was triggered by all of that and kicks the out of me. And I had had a C-section as hard as he could several times over and over again. And the next day it perpetuated worse to where I had sent the girls outside and a neighbor was watching them so they could play so I could have time to, do all my milk and the baby stuff and whatnot. He pushes me up against the door, holds a knife to my chest, says if I scream, he's going to pop my lungs and I'm going to drown in my own blood. So I'm trying to convey the seriousness of the kind of abuse that I endured. And when they say they understand, all they're doing is reading the Duluth model and thinking that they have a concept of what's going on. And that if I can't protect myself as somebody who just had a child or whatever the case may be, not being stronger than this person, I don't understand how they can tell me they get it.
They don't get it because this man also tried to rape me twice. Okay.
Yeah.
Rip my clothes off, tried to tie everything. But here's the thing. This is what makes me so mad about the criminal justice system. He did all that shit to me. All these were misdemeanors. Okay. But if I had shot him in his fucking head, they'd have got me for murder.
Exactly. And that's the thing. When that was my thinking during when I tried to defend myself, essentially I had done something similar. And the only thing that I could think is that if I do this, they're going to come take my kids anyway. They're going to put me in jail and I'm not going to be able to protect them. And so you're left with this choice of like, do you survive another day? Do your kids survive another day not being trafficked through the CPS? Because that's essentially what it is child trafficking for money to get that Title IV funding after the 97 AFSA. And they justify it by means of saying, oh, you're neglectful because you weren't able to protect yourself, even though I was a victim of a crime. So if I can't protect myself, of course, yes, I have to own and face the fact I wasn't able to protect my children from that. But even court-ordered places did not help me.
Right.
And these were domestic violence shelters or things that were put in place, and they did not help me. And I have proof of everything that I say, and I can back it up.
Right. I get it. And I understand your frustration, and I understand all the triggers, because my sister, and I love my sister to death. Okay. She slapped me in my face one time playing around. I thought I was going to kill my own sister because it was a trigger for me. Right. And And once again, he had more rights as the perpetrator than I did as the victim.
Well, and that's the thing. Another thing they try to twist is saying that, oh, you're so affected and you must have chosen this pattern and it was your childhood and it was this and it was that. And they say it's generational and so on and so forth. Yet if you look at my history, my own mother was part of the system. So if they did such a bang up job, how is it generational? Would be my question.
Well, here's the thing. CPS workers and police officers and judges and prosecutors and all these people that work for these agencies, they think that there's no dysfunction in their lives, okay? They're delusional. They're delusional because we do not live our lives in a courtroom. We don't live our lives in the CPS building. We don't live our lives where they do, right? So in their eyes, they live in this shelter world because who, right, is going to call CPS on a judge? Who is going to call CPS on a prosecutor? Who do you think a prosecutor is going to prosecute a CPS worker when they work hand in hand? Do you think a prosecutor is going to arrest a judge knowing that they're breaking the law? No.
You know,
regular people like us, they want us to be held accountable, but they don't want to be held accountable for their shit. Go ahead.
No, facts, because there's a senator out of New Hampshire, Leah Cushman, who's going to bat against CPS, and they got rid of like her whole sector there, and the group that she had done, and so she actually submitted a job form for people to fill out so that they could tell their story and talk about the corruption of what happens. Because this isn't the first time. If you look at the history of DCYF in New Hampshire, their lack of workers or how they keep going through directors left and right every few months and all of the corruption and dysfunction, it happens in every state. It's just people are now starting to talk about it.
When my case first happened, it was 30 years ago, social worker lied on stand, fraudulently filed paperwork, falsified information in the file. My attorney had her whole testimony impeached. Okay. The judge didn't like me.
Yeah.
But anyway, she threw out her whole testimony and they said they needed to fire her. When I would tell people what happened, this is what I would get. Oh, Tiffany, that shit's crazy. That shit don't happen.
Oh, yeah, until they experience it.
Right. Then I didn't know I was advocating.
Yeah.
But I was helping people, right? And we're winning. I mean, I'm helping with custody cases. I'm just helping. So one of the people that told me that shit did not happen to me, okay, now told me I'm in the courtroom, but they had the nerve to tell me that it did not happen. Same shit happened to her. Now she wanted my help. Do you know what I told her? I said, I'm not helping you because a hard head makes a soft ass. I told you what they were doing. You told me I was crazy. I will not help people like that because it's one thing to be ignorant of stuff like your rights and the laws. That's one thing. But when I'm telling you what's happening and you're blatantly telling people that shit does not happen, then all of a sudden now it happens to you and now all of a sudden you believe. It's too late because I would have told you how to get around it had you just believed me when I first told you.
Well, everybody thinks that it doesn't happen, but what they fail to realize is that these people are given something called qualified immunity. And so essentially, it doesn't matter what they say or do. They're not held accountable at all whatsoever. And it's that little clause that turns them into the biggest power-hungry, narcissistic bullies on the planet. And they get away with it because family court is based on preponderance of the evidence, which is only the likelihood that something is 51% true and not beyond a reasonable doubt. There's no burden on the state to prove anything unless you're in Jersey now, because that law's changed.
Yes, it has.
This is a problem because the CPS laws are different state to state, and this is the reason why it continues to be perpetual. And now they want to do an interstate compact in the southern states to say, oh, we have a lack of social workers and you can get a license here and now practice anywhere. Where's the oversight and accountability for that? How many more children are going to be trafficked through the system or killed in foster care or through the different programs that they have? Like here in Kentucky, they have Benchmark, they have NECO, and Benchmark, for example, is the agency that my children are involved with. Used to be called Life Path Services out of Ohio, and they got sanctioned over and over again for kids dying, lack of medical care, kids being trafficked. Comes down to good old boy Kentucky, where the laws are more lax, signs on, changes their name to Benchmark, and here they are doing the same thing. The OIG has prosecuted even the cabinet who had to change their name for similar instances back in 2007. And there has been multi-million-dollar cases in each of the states that I'm talking about. And yet everybody dismisses it like it never happened. As if our experiences aren't valid or very real.
Well, that's the problem, right? And I say this too. I even tell people in regular conversations because they all know what my favorite subjects are. When somebody said something about why justice is blind, right? Oh, because it's got to balance it. I said, that's bullshit. Justice is blind because they can't handle the truth. That's why justice is blind. They don't want to know the truth. They don't care about the truth. They only care about how much money they're bringing into the state or the town or the county or whatever.
Oh, that's the other thing. Down here, not only do they sit there and they hold you accountable for your part in everything, and you have to sit there and acknowledge every way that you could have done something different despite whatever choices you were handed.
Right.
But then on top of it, it's not your choice to have your kids taken, and you're assigned having to pay child support on top of all your normal bills, on top of your lawyer's fees, on top of everything else that they throw at you, whether it be visitation in some states, whether it be, whatever the case is, and they will run you ragged, bleed you dry, and then say, well, why did you fail?
Well, it's funny you say that because I was in an article, a friend of mine who's a lawyer, got in touch with this newspaper or whatever. They contacted, I don't know. She called me. She said, Tiffany, I really want you to do this interview. I said, what is it about? And she said, CPS, the lawyers, whatever. I said, all right. My headline, and she used it. I didn't know that's what she was going to use. The system sets parents up to fail. They have no constitutional right. No, they're told they have no rights, no constitutional rights. No, not. I'm telling you, it's 27-page report,
Mm-hmm.
and I even went to my own prosecutor here because I've known him for 20 some years. I said, let me tell you, I have a real problem with CPS, the lawyers, and these judges who have no accountability. I said, that's not right. That's not right. If they want us to be accountable, then they too need to be accountable. And he said, Tiffany, the state's going to react just like that. They're going to take the kids regardless. I said, and that is where it's wrong. And he said, oh, they have sovereign immunity. I said, oh, no, they do not. The only thing that has sovereign immunity is the state.
Well, even that, there is some case law that gets rid of qualified immunity. There were opinions that came out from the Supreme Court, but that's a different conversation we don't have time to jump into. But they really don't have accountability, because I remember before my first judge recused herself, I stood up in that courtroom, the one and only time I was ever able to speak, and it was for less than a minute. And I asked her, why was I unworthy of the protections underneath the Constitution of the United States? And I cited the Nicholson versus William case that says from the Supreme Court that you cannot remove children simply because they are exposed to domestic violence, because, gee, somebody out there realized that stuff happens. And yet you can't control everything that happens in those circumstances, but you still can get away. And obviously, I'm the non-offending parent here. I'm the one who's trying to get out of a situation I know that's unhealthy to be in. So I have to own the fact that I failed at doing so until I was able to find a way. Mm-hmm. But I still got out. And
so what did the judge say?
She basically tried to tell me and asked me, I had to name all the reasons and ways that my rights were violated. And at that point, I just kind of looked at her like she had 10 heads, because how is it you don't know your own laws if you're a judge sitting up there in your stupid little goth prom dress? You know?
See, here's the thing. It is our duty as United States citizens to know the laws and our rights, right? But this is where I have a problem with the judges, because they are the guardians of the Constitution, and they are there to protect the rights of the citizens, and they're not doing it. They're protecting the state, the prosecutor, the CPS workers. And you know what? Everybody drinks from the same fountain, and people don't believe this either. Your case is already determined before you ever walk in that courtroom. They already know. They don't care what you have to say. Their mind is made up.
Well, no kidding, because my ECO was never signed, even though on record this judge stated that she had done it. And then later on down the road, a disbar judge named Kathy Stein comes up on the paperwork magically, but it still was not the judge that I had. And then the 72-hour hearing I was supposed to have, I never saw a judge. I had a phone call for 2 minutes and 48 seconds where I heard the worker talking to somebody who they claimed was in the room. I never got a chance to speak, and I got hung up on. That ain't a hearing. So not only were my kids unlawfully removed, despite everything else that happened, I was never protected from the get-go. They were pursuing their piece of meat with the perpetrator, and they didn't care who they stepped on to get to that, and then said, oh, it's a perk. We can get federal funding for the kids too. Let's do this. And I'm not saying that I am without fault in the parts of the situation that I could have done better, but you can't sit there and tell a victim, gee, you could have just left. It's not that easy. The most dangerous time is when you're trying to leave. Do you have any idea how many times I did? My child talks about it, even in their little reports, and say, no, he would always find us. How long was that phone in my car? And how many times did he find me? I tried to leave so much.
Trust me, I get it. And when I did get rid of mine, he came back a couple weeks later and tried to kick my front door in and stab me to death with a butter knife. And his exact words to me, and I'll never forget these words: Bitch, when I get in, I'm going to stab you to death in front of all 3 of the kids.
Well, that was another thing my perpetrator did too, is he would threaten my family, and this was another point of contention between us, is because when they also said that they had dropped him off on that town line, my mother at the time lived in that area. And I was scared for her because some of the threats he had made was talking about nailing her door shut and setting her house on fire. You know what I mean? But the only thing I could do when I had the kids was try to get away.
Listen, I do not blame any women in domestic violence situations. I've been there. I know how hard it is. No money. Your friends, like you said, they flip flop. Oh yeah, you can stay here, and then when you call them, there ain't no room. I get it. You can't get help from the police. All they do is come, if they come, pick him up, take him to jail, let him out the next day. I get it. I don't blame any woman in a domestic violence situation. That it's actually called battered woman syndrome.
Yeah.
So stop being so hard on yourself about that, because there was nothing wrong with you. Did you hear me?
What?
There was nothing wrong with you. You were not his problem. He was his own problem. You just happened to be the one that caught the hell from it.
Yeah. That was a big issue because when the police would come, part of what they do is they separate the parties. They have your kids in the house, and when you go outside and you're sitting there telling a story, know that this person's looking out the window trying to hear what you say, and you know that you got to go back in that house. And then they sit there and they blame you and be like, well, you didn't do this, you didn't do that to help us do this situation. No, take the perpetrator out of the house. Come inside and talk to me, and let me talk to you in privacy so I can tell you what's going on. So I'm not scared of that this person is going to kill me when I go back in those doors, or hurt my kids while I'm out here trying to tell you something.
I get it. I lived it. He tried to kidnap my infant baby. I mean, he was hanging off rafters with my infant baby, no coat, no shoes, no nothing, in the middle of a snowstorm. I've been there, man. I've survived a lot. I'm surprised I'm still alive, to be honest with you. Well, I'm going to end the show. And I want you to come back on. But I think this is good enough for right now. So don't get off. Stay on when I end. So with that, we're going to end the show. And as far as I know, we will be back on Wednesday at 7 p.m. But always check, because sometimes we move it if somebody's got something going on. With that, have a great day.